Welcome to this session on basics of economics. In this session, we will let down the basic framework of what economy is all about, and then we will go on and understand the concepts in detail. So this session is very important to lay down the framework, and then as we go along, we understand the nitty gritties of the subject. So when we talk about basics of economics, it's very important to understand what kind of economies are there in the world. So there are different types of economies in the world. So the one most famous form is called the capitalist economy. So in this case of economy, ownership of means of production are with the individuals, that is private individual or corporates. So basically the production is being led by the private individuals. And so because there is a private involvement, so price determination happens as per market forces. What do we mean by market forces? Demand and supply. So where there is no government intervention and prices are being determined by the demand of a product or and the supply of the product. A very good example of this would be, the prices in the market, vegetable market. So whenever there is a, heavy rainfall or there is a, there is a drought, the supply has gets reduced. In such a scenario, because the demand remains the same, whereas the supply has gone down, leads to a situation where the prices go up. So in such a scenario, market determines the price. So price determination is by the market and not by government at any place. And then government role is very minimal in such a scenario. And such a minimal role of government is has also been called as laissez-faire, where government says the least. It has least business in the price determination or the playing in the market. So these are, kind of a markets which are also called as free market or, competitive market or consumer sovereignty or income inequality are the basic features of this market. What do we mean by this? That there'll be free market. Everybody is free to come and, participate. There are no licenses required. There are no special approvals required. This leads to a good amount of competition coming in. Why competition? Because everybody who thinks he can, fight it out in the market will come and compete. And in such a scenario, the competition grows. And thus, consumer enjoys a sovereignty. He is not decided upon, that he is not dictated by any kind of a authority, and it is consumer who can make a free choice. So in such a scenario, what we witness that many of the institutions go on to take the income part, and in income inequality is more there rather than equal distribution of income. There will be income inequality that has been witnessed in such a scenario. So a very good example is the USA, the US market. USA though has some regulations and welfare schemes, but it is largely a capitalist economy where most of the production is done by the private sector. Even in the, the bigger markets like the aircraft market or even in the satellite area, you can see this a Tesla owner is there, and so on. In such a scenario, corporates are leading the charge in all kind of a aspect. Whereas, in the price determination also, the prices are being determined by market. They're nothing to do with, the what government lets down. So there's no rationing, there's no, capping on it. So it is all free market. And the government role, as we understand, is minimal. They only let down the basic framework of policies and they don't go and intervene much into how the market is running. They let the market forces take the course. And as I said, that it's a free market in that sense that there are no restrictions on it. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum is a socialist economy. So what kind of an economy is socialist economy? I think the predated USSR, or what we call as the Soviet Union, is a good example. Even China of a past was more of a communist in nature, but the idea was the ownership was with state government, state or the government, or they were controlling the resources. Many a time they were also determining the price of the product. So central planning authority was there. Then there is more objective is to bring equality and social welfare and not profit. So it was more on the equality part and the social welfare part. This leads to a situation where there is more centralization of planning. There is attempt to bring equality. There's no private ownership. Most resources whether of the production or of the the output is being owned by the government. So example is a former USSR or Cuba. So these are very good examples of socialist economies that have been there. In a socialist economy, everybody's working for the government is the one which is running the show, and private equity or the private in ownership is very, very limited. So India decided what to do. India was confused when India became independent, what to choose between a capitalist economy or a socialist economy. Capitalist economy, because India was a poor country with few people who were able to earn their living, going a capitalist way was not desirable as it would have led to concentration of wealth. But then socialist was also not the right strategy, as it was realized that it was not a strategy which was working in the world. So in such a scenario, India wanted to take, the benefits of both the kind of economies. So India wanted to have the features of the capitalist economy, where there should be private ownership, there should be competition, there should be a free market, people should be able to, compete and get best of products. But they wanted to maintain social system so that there's no concentration of wealth. There is equal opportunity to everybody. So they wanted a coexistence of, both the private setup, where private organizations or the enterprises are making doing the production, where the public sector is there to support and also look into the core areas or areas where which are capital intensive or areas which require a lot of know-how which is not available in the open, or they felt this has a long gestation period. So like the coal plants or the steel plants that were let down, or even government setting up dams and all these things. So these are more of ideas, and even in the areas where government felt that there's not enough infrastructure and private companies would not be inclined to move to, they prefer to go the by setting a government themselves. So it is more of a regulated capitalism that is being targeted, and there are welfare schemes also being done. So India after independence adopted what we call as a mixed economy model. Industrial policy resolution that you would see, the 5-year plans you would see, had a characteristics of mixed economy. It was neither totally capitalist nor socialist into full form, but a mixed economy. And India is a good example. Another good example is France. France has also tried to maintain such kind of a scenario. So when we understand with this, that mixed economy tries to take, the private enterprises as well as the government setup. So this is basically what the idea of the economies, kind of economies that exist. So we came across that the three kind of economies we come across, and the first is the capitalist one, the second is the socialist, and the third is mixed economy. And India preferred the mixed economy. Now, when we talk about the economy, we have selected. So there are some sectors of economy. Okay, so Indian economy, when we talk about, so there are majorly three sectors, or you can say fourth sector has also been added, but it is also called as a, we'll go along and I'll explain you why we call it three or four, and there's always a confusion on that. So first is the primary sector. So what is the primary sector? It is the activities which are extraction of the raw material. So there is no processing per se. We are just trying to get what is there available in the nature, or a very minimal effort is being put in, and we are trying to achieve the output mainly dependent on the natural resources. So agriculture is a good example. Fishing is a good example. In fishing, usually when we do fishing, we are mostly largely reliable on what is there available in the nature. Yes, there is fish breeding that happens. There is, fish farms that are set up. But on a larger scale, if we see, fishing is basically a process where we just go and fish out whatever is available in the nature. Forestry. So yes, there are forests being let down to be used in future, but largely it is the available forests which are cut down and their products are taken. Then mining. Mining is just extraction of the resources. So where we are just trying to extract the raw material is what we call as a primary sector. And contribution in India is about 18% of the GDP. What is GDP? That is a very important topic. GDP. We'll go ahead and understand it. To give a hint about it, it is called gross domestic product. So it is the value of the total products that are created or produced in a country in a given year. So it's a gross value of produce in a given year in a country. We'll have a better understanding of this as we go forward. But to just to make you understand, so whatever is the total value of the products that have been created in a country is called GDP. So currently India's GDP is around rupees 330 lakh crore. That is the amount of goods and services India produces in a year. As a whole, as a country, we produce around 330 lakh crore rupees of goods and services worth of, right? So this is the total GDP. Out of this total GDP of 330 lakh crores, 18% comes from the primary sector, whereas we employ 42% of our workforce. So two important numbers, 18 and 42. 18 is the percentage of the GDP that we are getting, and 42% is the workforce that is coming in. So this is the percent of GDP and this is the workforce. So these are very important numbers to understand, that around 40% of our population is working in the primary sector, whereas it is only able to generate 18% of the value of the products that are coming in a country. Then comes the secondary sector, which is more related to manufacturing and industry. So, it is converts these raw material into finished goods. So something like a steel industry, textile, automobile, construction, and they contribute around 25% to the GDP. And we know what GDP is. It is the total value of the goods and services produced in a country in a given year. And 25% goes to this. So now we have 25% to the secondary market sector, 18% to the primary sector. So this makes around 43%. So the remaining 57%, where does it go? That is the big question. So let's understand that. That goes to the tertiary sector. What is tertiary sector? Tertiary sector is basically the service sector. So whether it's a trading or it's a transport or it is IT or banking or education or healthcare, all these aspects which are more not products but service oriented is what India basically works upon. So greater than 55% of our GDP is through the service sector. So most of the money that government, out of the 330 lakh crores, you can very well say around 170 to 180 lakh crores is coming, mind these are crores, right? This money is coming from the service sector, which is basically education, healthcare, banking, IT, transport, and trade, right? But then there is a more refined version of quaternary sector, we call it, or modern tertiary sector, which is more related to R&D, data analysis, consulting, software, AI, biotechnology. These are knowledge based and high skill services. So, it is the higher end of the, this. If IT is there, we'll say the R&D, that is good, data analysis, which is happening, or consultancy, which is happening, all these big four and all, they fall under this segment of quaternary sector, right? Also called as a modern tertiary sector. So we have included this into the part of those 55%. There's no separate segregation that has been prepared. So quaternary and tertiary put together gives what 55% of the GDP of India. So now that's the basic understanding. And now there's another aspect to it. So this was the three sectors we had, and now we talk about something called the formal economy and informal economy. So what is the difference between the formal and informal? Formal economy is an economy where it is being, there is a government regulations over that. It is being regulated by the government. There are taxation laws apply on it, labor laws apply on it, social security programs are being there. So it is a segment which is identified by the government and is being regulated by different government agencies. So examples are registered companies or government jobs or MNCs, which where the labor laws, the taxation laws, the social security laws are applicable. Whereas the informal sector is a not regulated or unregulated sector. Neither the tax laws apply, nor the labor laws apply, nor the government regulations apply. So they are basically catering to what you call as the mostly example of street vendors, daily wage laborers, where they do not get regulated by government. So 85% of the workforce still in India works in informal sector. That doesn't mean that they don't work in these companies and all. They do, but they do through contractors or others who actually are so small that they basically work in an informal. And this is also what takes us to something closer called organized and unorganized. So there's a small distinction between informal and formal. It is more related to law application. Organized and unorganized is more related to, the kind of a, what do you say, the security he has with a job. So organized, there is again regulation is better, like working hours, fixed pay, job security, legal protection. So all these banks, PSUs get it. Unorganized, low wages, no job security, seasonal work, construction worker, agriculture labor. So all these are again more unorganized is more closer to what we call informal, and organized is more closer to what we call as a formal. So very small distinction between formal and organized, they are more or less the same. And here informal and unorganized are also more of a similar nature. So this is basically this, the economies that India has. So if you divide economy, can be divided into sectors, which we understood as primary, secondary, and tertiary. They can be formal and informal, and they can be organized and unorganized. So this is basically what kind of economies that exist within the economy of the mixed economy that we have. The type of economy we follow is mixed economy, within which there are sectors, and these are also kind of a division of the that economy. Now let us understand the concept which are, the bedrock of any economic understanding. So any economic study that has to happen has to be based on some concepts, and one of the important concepts is GDP, gross domestic product, something you will be hearing a lot about in the newspapers, and otherwise in any understanding of economy, GDP is a very important topic. So what is GDP? It is gross domestic product. So important word is gross, and then second word is domestic, and third is product. So gross means it is not the final, it is not the net, but gross value. Second, it is domestic. Domestic means that what is being produced within the periphery of the country, domestic within the country. And product means production that is happening. So total value of final goods. Now important word is total value. Final goods and services produced within a country in a given period, usually 1 year, regardless of who owns the production. So within the periphery of the country, the total value of final goods, important word is final, not intermediate goods, final goods and services produced within a country in a given period, usually of a 1 year, regardless of who owns the production. So why we are saying regardless of who owns the production? Because we are not here telling, it could be a foreign company but producing in India, or an Indian company producing in India. In either conditions, the it makes the part of the GDP. So it's a basic measure of economic output. Okay, so whenever we talk about across countries, across times, when we have to do a comparison, we go with this economic output. So that is why GDP is important. So we are basically talking about production that is happening within the periphery of the country by the people who are residing in the country. They may be Indian national, they may be foreign nationals, and all the value of goods, final goods and goods. Now there is a small difference when we call it, there are two important aspects: GDP at market price and GDP at factor cost. So what is the difference between the two? Let's understand this. Very important concepts. GDP at market price. So it is the value of goods and services produced, measured at prices paid by purchasers. So when you buy a product, suppose a laptop, and you buy a laptop for say rupees 1 lakh. Okay, you spend 1 lakh rupees to buy a laptop. So that is the, and that adds to the value of GDP at market price. But this market price has a cost which the producer spent. Then there must be some taxation, and he must have received some subsidies from the government, maybe electrical subsidy or some kind of a incentive, like a PLI scheme, which is a more of a production linked incentive government is giving to promote electronics in the country. So when there is high indirect taxes, some GST which has been imposed, GDP at market price is greater than GDP at factor cost. So the value of the product was actually 90,000, right? Government imposed 20,000 rupees as GST on that, let's suppose. So the value became 1 lakh and 10,000. Now they had given some subsidy of say 10,000 rupees, which got subtracted, and now the value is 1 lakh. Actually, the cost of was 90,000, but you paid 1 lakh. So market price is 1 lakh, factor cost is 90,000. Thus, GDP at market price is higher than GDP at factor cost. This is market price and this is factor cost is higher because there is more indirect taxation to it. When we talk about GDP at factor cost, value of output measured at cost to the producer, excluding or net indirect taxes and subsidies, gives a picture of income accruing to factors of production. So now just we understood that GDP at market prices is higher than GDP at factor cost if, let me clarify, if indirect taxes that are imposed are greater than the subsidies government give. Now this could turn around as well. Suppose government wants to promote a lot of production in a given area. So if you want to promote a lot of production in a given area, government may go on to say, okay, I'll give you 30,000 rupees of subsidy while I will impose a tax of 20,000 rupees. So in such a scenario, the price of the market price may come down to say it was originally 90,000, then another 20,000 was imposed because of the GST, and then subtracted was another 30,000. So what is left now is 80,000 is the price. So in such a scenario, the factor cost will be 90,000, whereas the market price will be 80,000, which will be lower. So whenever the subsidies are more than the indirect taxes, we will end up getting a lower GDP at market price, right? So they cannot always be assumed that GDP at market price is higher than GDP at factor cost. It depends on the amount of indirect taxes and the amount of subsidy that government provides. I think this makes a bit clear. Now let's go forward and understand another very important aspect. So what we understood was a gross domestic product, whatever is being produced within the periphery of the country. Now, all the people who are residing in a country may not be citizen or nationals of India. So there may be some foreigners who are coming here and earning. Though these foreign nationals will take the money back when they go back to their own country. So why would we include that in our own income? Actually, that production or the money that he's produced or the goods he has produced are not in the name of India. So adding them to the GDP is not the right thing, or believing that this is our value of goods we produced would not be right. So what we took, we changed it to what we call as a gross national product. Why national? Because it is by the nationals of India, Indian nationals, in a way you can say, or gross national income. That is the amount of income that we are generating is GNP or GNI. So GDP plus net factor income from abroad. So Indians working outside, earning, and income earned by foreign domestically subtracted. So what we add, that what the Indians outside have earned. So from the GDP we add the amount of money that Indian nationals earn abroad minus the foreign nationals earn in India, is what we get as a GNP. Because this money belongs to the people of India, the nationals of India. This is the amount of money they have produced. So it captures the income accruing to nationals even if some production is abroad, important for cross-border income flows. So wherever India may not be having many of the production centers maybe in other countries for various reasons, GNP is a good example of that. So when we move forward to this example, we understood, okay, there is a GDP, that is the value of goods and services produced within the periphery of a country, final goods and services. We reach to the example of GNP, which says it is about the nationals and not the periphery. Then we go to a concept called NNP, net national product or net national income, or from GDP we come to NDP. So what are these gross? Now gross has moved to net. So when does that happen? Gross is the earnings. What we do not account for in gross is the depreciation. Every time an asset is used, a machinery is put to work, the machinery will have some wear and tear. It will lose some value out of it. So when it loses some life out of it, that needs to be taken, subtracted from it. So the gross figures minus the depreciation, that is the consumption of fixed capital, that is the machinery. Because machinery over time, becomes obsolete as well as it faces wear and tear. The value of that has to go down. So gross figures minus depreciation is what we get net figures. And that is where we get NNP, that is the net national product, that is the production by the nationals of India, is basically GNP minus the depreciation that we have. And same concept is called NNI also. So GDP minus depreciation will become NDP, net domestic product. So it reflects the net income available, shows sustainable income after accounting for wear and. So these are very important concepts. So we started with GDP, we went to GNP, then we understood what is, NNP or NDP, right? Now let us understand something called as gross value added. So value of output minus value of intermediate consumption. So many a times, remember in GDP, we talk about a term called final goods and services. It is not just the goods and services, it is the final goods and services. So value of output minus value of intermediate consumption, what production adds in each sector. So this is how we try to calculate this is gross value added. Very useful for sectoral decomposition of growth, removing distortion of indirect taxes and subsidies. So gross value added is a method we use to calculate these things where we are trying to remove the intermediate products out of them. So wherever a product is considered as final but becomes an intermediate for other is removed. So now let's have methods of calculating this national income. We know what is net national income and now we do it. So there are three methods that have been recommended. One is called the product method, then is called the income method, and the third is called the expenditure method. So let's understand the product or output method. What is summed up or counted? Added value added by all sectors. So whatever is the value of primary goods, secondary and tertiary goods, we add them. Gross value added by each sector plus net indirect taxes is GDP at market price. So basically we are saying GDP at market price, which we understood is what? Gross value added by all of them plus the net indirect taxes. That is where we come as, right? So this gross value added is basically what we understood as GDP at factor cost. Sector GVA data, agriculture, industry from an economic survey is what provides their data. So basically we are doing the value addition that is happening. Income method, some incomes earned by all factors of production. So all the incomes that have been earned by all factors of production is added up in a main income method. This is another method of calculating. So we just don't need to go much into detail. Understand that the net income can be calculated in three manners. One is the production method or value added by each of them, income earned by each of them, and then expenditure. So these are basically how we calculate net income of country. So in when we add up the earned incomes, it will be wages, rents, interest, profits, mixed income, adjustment for depreciation, tax subsidies, and all that. It is very difficult to measure. So we usually do not follow this approach. Third is the expenditure method, where sum of all final expenditures in the economy, because whatever has been produced is bought by somebody. So undertake an expenditure. So private consumption, government consumption, or investment, gross fixed capital formation, or change in stocks. See what will happen. A product is there. A product has been produced. It may will be either be consumed by a private or by government, and if it is not consumed, either it will remain as a capital good or as an inventory, or it may get exported, right? So there are three things that can happen. Either it can be consumed or it can be stored as a capital good, as an inventory, or so net exports is what we call. So these are when we add all the expenditure forms is we call as the calculation of net income by expenditure method. So for India, private final consumption expenditure, gross fixed capital formation are basically used. So we say what is the expenditure we have undertaken? These two. What is the capital formation? These two. And then what is the exports? Net exports. Right? So there are three methods. Now let us understand another important aspect of real versus nominal. Earlier we understood between gross and net. Now gross and net is what is lies between gross and net? Gross and net, what is the thing between that? Depreciation. That is the wear and tear. Whereas now we talk about real and nominal national. So it is nominal is at current prices. Real is at constant prices. So what do we mean by that? Let me explain this. Suppose you had a basket of products. Okay, suppose you had fruits. Now these fruits are there. Suppose this fruit basket costed you 100 rupees today. And tomorrow, after 1 year, it costs you 110 rupees. It's the same fruit basket. Will you say that our GDP has grown from 100 to 110? When the basket of fruits is the same, it is the same basket of fruits. Is there a growth here? That is the big question. No. Why? Because we have not added more goods to it. No more fruits have not been, produced in a country, but the value of the goods has gone up, and that could have gone up because of rise in prices, and that rise in prices is what we call as inflation. So there's a concept called inflation. So what is inflation? Inflation is basically general rise in prices. So a basket of fruits which was rupees 100 today, maybe 110 next year, would still be equal. But in nominal case income, it will say no, we have grown. So that is why we prefer what we call as a real income. Real income means the prices remain the same. We keep the prices which were there in the base year when we calculate GDP. So we see whether we have increased the number of products we were producing at the same price and not the total price as on date. So values measured in case of nominal is measured using current year prices includes inflation. Whereas in constant prices, value measured using the prices of a base year inflation adjusted. So we still keep the values of what were there in given base year. And base year is basically, for example, that's okay. We take a base year of 2015. So what was the value of this basket of fruits in 2015 and what is the value it is today? Okay. So when we take it, when we have to compare, we will take the same value that were there in 2015 to know whether there is a growth in GDP. So the purpose is nominal shows the size of economy in money terms, includes the price effects. If prices have gone up, it will show the economy has gone bigger. But actually whether it has gone bigger, we'll understand only from real. Allows comparison over time with physical growth, the volume change, stripping out the price changes. So for example, nominal GDP of India is priced at 330 lakh crores for financial year 24-25. It is up from 300 lakh crores in 23-24. So you would say India's GDP has grown by 10%. But have you heard that in news? No. Indian GDP has not grown by 10% because that is nominal GDP. That is not, that includes the inflation also. There is a rise in prices. Thus the GDP has grown. Real GDP at constant prices, that is the 2011 and 12 which we are taking, India stands at 187 6.97 lakh crores. If we take the value of the product goods produced today at the value of 2011 and 12, it is 187 lakh crores in 24-25, whereas it was 176.51 lakh crores in 23-24 with a growth rate of 6.5%. You would have heard these figures more often: 6.5, 6.7. This is where India actually hovers around in their GDP growth. Okay, so hope you're able to understand this point, that whenever we are talking about Indian, concept of nominal and real, nominal is with inflation, whereas real is about the actual prices that exist on that day from previous comparison. So when we do this comparison, we see real GDP growth, that is from 22 over 20, 23-24 over 22-23 was 8.2%, 6.5% for financial year 24. Nominal GDP growth showed 9.6% and 9.8% because there has been an inflationary factor to this. Real GAV, what is GAV? Gross value added. So this is another method of calculating net income. Real happened at 7.2% and 6.4%, whereas nominal GAV was 8.5 and 9.5. So this is, see, the higher values in the nominal is because of inflation. And you see inflation, that is retail inflation. We'll understand what retail inflation is. Was around 5.4%, and later it was 4.8%. So they are all adding up to, the value of nominal GDP, and that is not the correct parameter or measurement to actually know whether your country is doing well. Suppose the price of a good, suppose, apple costed you rupees 50 today, and next year it costs you rupees 80, the same apple. Will you say that the economy has grown by 60%? No. Why? Because the same apple has now gone, or prices have gone up by 60% from 50 to 80. Right? Production has not gone up. Economy as a whole has not gone up. So it is more inflationary, the growth of the GDP. That is why we take the figure as a real GDP growth, which is adjusted. So if this year there were 10 apples that were produced in the country, valuing at 50 per each, so 500 was the value of the GDP. Now, keeping the same value, next year if there are 12 apples produced and there is a 600 worth of goods, apples, then we will say this, there is a 20% jump in the GDP. That is the correct measure of knowing the GDP. So now let us take, once we have understood the GDP, the real and the nominal, let's take another very important concept called gross fixed capital formation. So we just understood before this that, okay, whenever there is a, there may be some expenditures. So expenditure is where we consume. So there's a consumption of a product. It could be by the private or the government. But then some product which is not consumed may be invested as a capital money. So not everything which is produced is consumed, that is invested. So capital goods, we understand capital. Capital which gives us, value in future as well. So gross fixed capital, and what is fixed capital? Fixed capital means assets which are fixed in nature. So it could be, the buildings, the bridges, the transport infrastructure, the airports, the railway stations, you know, which have multiplier effect. We'll understand this. So gross fixed capital formation measures the value of acquisition of a new fixed assets by business sector, government, and households. So it is basically a new fixed assets, whether by the business, government, or household, but does not include the residential buildings in some contexts. And it minuses the disposal of fixed assets in that period. So gross fixed capital formation is basically the fixed capital assets that have been created, net value of that, net fixed in this, whatever has been disposed has been taken out and whatever. Why we are saying gross in this scenario? Because it is not inflationary adjustment yet. No depreciation has been considered. We have just net in the sense that we have removed the ones which are disposed and we have created new are taken. So new creations are taken whereas the old disposals are removed. So it's new minus the disposed and it is not yet depreciation adjusted. So that is why it is called gross. So fixed assets include infrastructure, machinery, equipment, buildings. It excludes inventory and land purchases and financial assets. So these are not fixed capital. Role in economy, it shows investment into productive capacity, more GFCF, potentially higher future production, better infrastructure, more jobs. Key component of GDP and indicates a business and government confidence. So growth has been around 7% year on year. We have been we have been investing more in the fixed capital. And as part of the GDP, 29.6% as per World Bank data, or 30% of our GDP, the goods that are produced in the country are going into fixed capital formation. So this is a good sign that we are actually investing into infrastructure, machinery, equipment. So what is the gross? Basically, the idea is captures both private and public fixed investments. Good measure of future productive capacity that how much we're going to go. Good forward indicator, infrastructure, machinery investment is a future output. Sectoral breakdown can be done how much in construction, how much in manufacturing, identify which sectors are driving the growth. High GFC relative to GDP signals the potential of growth. But issue is being gross, it does not account for depreciation. Some of the investment might just be replacement rather than net addition. So maybe products are losing value, bridges go down, they lose value and then they get washed away also by monsoon and other. Not all investment is equally productive. So delay, cost overruns, underutilized capacity, reduce effectiveness. So we cannot say every bridge holds the same value. Maybe different bridges give different benefits. Data lags are also there, estimation issues are there, difference in price indices can also impact. If financed by a high debt or inflationary means, it can actually be a big risk. Investment is skewed towards non-productive asset and social returns may also be. So basically, we are saying that yes, gross capital, fixed capital formation is a good idea, good concept, but still it is not foolproof because it is not accounting for depreciation, it is not accounting for the effectiveness, and there may be cost overruns, there may be estimation issues, but still it remains a good parameter to know how country is expected to do in future because it is trying to produce goods which will be giving multiplier effect. Economy will grow faster. See, if there is good infrastructure, there will be always be transport will be better, the logistics will be better, the industry can do better because the goods move faster, the time they take is lesser, and the things work better. So this is the whole idea of understanding the basics of economics. So we started with what we called as types of economy. We started with what we call as a capitalist economy, and then we moved to what is called as socialist, and then mixed. Then we went to the sectors of economy when we started with primary sector, then secondary sector. Primary where we are basically using the raw material. Secondary we are processing these raw material. Third is a tertiary sector which is more driven by the services, and quaternary sector, a part of modern tertiary as we call. Then we went ahead and understood that there's a formal sector and the informal sector, and there's an organized and unorganized sector. That is also there. Then we moved ahead and understood the concept of GDP, that is the goods value of goods and services, final goods and services produced within the periphery of a country within a year. When we moved a bit forward and from GDP, when we talk about nationals, it became GNP. When we removed depreciation, it became NNP and also NDP. So now this was the nationals which were handling it, and this was the depreciation which was handling it. And then we understood that these values can be nominal, inflation without inflation adjustment, or with inflation as real. And why real is better than nominal, we also understood that. Then finally we gave to the concept of that this net income can be calculated in three ways. It can be highly value added, it can be income based, for expenditure based. And then we understood that income is a more difficult way to understand. So basically expenditure and GVR are better methods of calculation. Then we finally came to the concept of GFCF, that is gross fixed capital formation, GFCF. So this idea is more about productivity in the future, that how a country can do better when they're investing in fixed infrastructure. So that was basic idea we had on this session, and this session would let down, as I said, the foundation where you can now understand the other concepts of economics. So that is all from this session. Thank you.